Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cosmos with an interview this week on practical theology in Catholic education. Quite an interesting one we've got compared to previous topics, but yes, this is when I was wanting to know who in my corner, whom I've known, anyone who've known in these years with theological expertise. This is the way that I suit people at my Catholic sixth form. I've been wondering how to get any of my former teachers involved, and here we have Mr. Lewis, or well, Andy Lewis, you can call him, but I have to call him as I used to a few years ago. Yes, he taught two-thirds of my RS course, on both philosophy, religion, and religion and ethics. And yes, what an amazing guy with a lot of wisdom on how to revise and many different amazing techniques he had. And I thought he'd be the perfect person for an interview with ToTheCosmos. And with that being said, when I asked him about what topic he'd be used to, he said it would be practical theology and how that fits into a Catholic education, which is definitely something that you're used to, aren't you? You were promoted in my time to become deputy head teacher of Catholic life, and you definitely have a massive impact on what the school and sixth form have to say regarding that. So, to start off, I would like you said that your expertise was obviously a practical theology for Catholics. Can you explain a bit more about this theology within 2 minutes?
Of course, and thank you for that very kind introduction, Jack. I think for me, and I'm conscious of some of the other guests that you've had who are kind of professors in theology, and I do have a theology degree, but my master's was in Catholic school leadership, which really is the idea of bringing together kind of the principles, the theological principles of Catholic theology and Catholic education, but in a very practical way. How can you have the principles and the practice come together? So I think that's probably my area of expertise, particularly compared to some of your other guests. I always kind of think back to the way in which kind of priests are trained for their ministry in the Catholic Church, where they do kind of a pastoral theology, because you have the kind of very high level theology that will happen in the university, which is very important. But actually, what does that look like to the people you serve? And I guess I'm very conscious of that as a kind of a leader in a Catholic school, that, as much as it's great to be kind of quoting Aquinas and a lot of the other kind of great Catholic, theologians, actually, I've got to think about what does that look like for the experience that students have within their time in the school. And it's a lived out theology. It's we were a school with a Franciscan heritage, and I kind of come back to St. Francis, who talks about kind of spreading the gospel and occasionally using words. Our actions, the way we treat people, the way we kind of serve people. I think for me, that's kind of the theology that I suppose is my area of expertise, because that's what I have to live out every day. My faith, my theological background have kind of got to come together and kind of manifest themselves in the way I conduct myself, the way in which I lead my professional life. So that's what I think I mean by that kind of practical, or maybe a pastoral theology, in a school-based setting.
Wow, no, that's an amazing answer. So one of the most important emphases in education today, and generally I mean secular education, it tends to be success, of course, passing tests to move on to the next stage, passing exams to be able to get to university kind of thing. You wrote your master's dissertation, apparently, on how a certain theology inspires a approach to rewards and sanctions. Would you mind just running through that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So my master's dissertation at St. Mary's, where I did my Catholic school leadership MA, really did look at this kind of whole idea of being kind of gospel inspired and Christ led in our approach to rewards and sanctions. And that is quite interesting in terms of, I suppose at the base level, it's that kind of very practical sense of what would Jesus do. That it's quite a popular movement around the WWJD, but I think there is a real emphasis for school leaders to genuinely think, what does the gospel teach us about, rewards and sanctions and things like that? Some of the things that I kind of go back to kind of when I'm looking at scripture and the theology and the principles there is, Jesus did have his red lines. The rich young man, there was a very clear expectation, and it was kind of, you do this or you can't come in. I always think that's quite a fascinating story. I don't think it's a story that for me is about wealth being bad. I think for that person, that was his barrier. And again, that individualized approach is important in school. Different students have different barriers to success. In terms of kind of rewards, I think, what we're doing in school is thinking about what rewards look like in extrinsic sense, exam grades that will lead to, good salaries and things like that, but also the intrinsic. And, in school, we've done a lot of work in St. Bond's around kind of the virtues and being virtuous people and doing the right thing because it's the right thing. Sometimes I kind of get, and when I was doing kind of my research, which was a very kind of, it was a research project based on, social action study. And it was kind of looking at, why do some people behave, why do, and how should we be rewarding? Should we be just rewarding people for just doing the right thing? But actually, should the focus really be, on, as I said, I always like the phrase kind of doing the right thing because it's the right thing, not because there's necessarily kind of an immediate reward attached to it. And, I feel that is kind of the message of the gospel, really, because yes, there is this kind of eschatological reward of kind of heaven. I don't think in a realistic sense, Christians would particularly think every day, all of their actions, I will do that because I'm getting to heaven. And as I said, we've kind of done quite a lot of work on kind of virtue education and kind of character education. And those virtues are based on, got the theological virtues. I'm just looking, I've got the poster behind me here. But that kind of flourishing and growing in goodness. Our school motto is kind of
in holiness learning.
Absolutely, but that holiness is very in goodness, in wholeness. It really is kind of flourishing. And I think, again, when we talk about the principles and the practice, Catholic education is very much centered on that education of the whole person. And, that personal development is really important. Getting good grades is really vital, but also that really holistic education of growing the young people that are entrusted to us in our care. And I know you've said, direct experience of that. There's lots of sixth forms that will get you good grades, but I genuinely would like to feel that we offered something more to you and to all the other young people. And I think, for me, all of that is rooted. I'm sure there's secular, non-religious, community schools that do that as well. I really do think there's a kind of a moral imperative as well for us that's rooted in the Gospels, it's rooted in the person of Jesus. Jesus, took that responsibility of bringing the best out of people very seriously. And I think we've got to do that as well. I mean, that's the root of education, isn't it? To kind of draw out the best in people. But I think for us, there is that kind of theological underpinning, if you like, of why we must be doing it. It's not a desirable. It's a fundamental, really, of the Catholic vision for education.
Wow. Yes. No, that makes sense. And can I just say, yes, this is more or less what I have been learning. I mean, Catholic institutions, I have to say, in this seem pretty unique because my experience, unlike a lot of the lads, so for context, those of you who don't know, St. Bonaventure's is lower school, which is for all boys, but the sixth form is mixed gender. But I was not at that secondary school. I was at Lister. I was in a secular place. And actually, when I decided to probably become Christian just before year 9 and ended up growing in faith, I'm like, you know what? I need a faith-centered place is going to help me in my life a bit better. And in all honesty, I've seen massive differences, I think, in the ethos, in the just different approaches, and what I was challenged in, it was different between both schools. So what I am, yeah, as I've said, I'm fascinating between the understanding the differences in the way that St. Bond's operates as a school. Is there more you can say on that? Is my third question, because you've spoken a bit about that in second.
I mean, I think one of the differences that and I wouldn't say, I'd also note that there's probably a variety amongst Catholic schools as well. I wouldn't say all Catholic schools are the same. I would like to think they share some of the kind of principles. I think one of the things for me that we are not afraid of is using the word love, for example. And I don't think, again, when we kind of return to the Gospels, we've got it in John's letter, God is love. And therefore, if we are a community of gods, love has got to be at the absolute heart of that. And I think probably, schools will always have love in them. It's a vocational job. Probably in other schools, and you mentioned your previous school, they probably wouldn't talk about love in the same way that we kind of feel a bit happy about. We're quite happy to say to our students, we love you. That doesn't mean that we're just going to let you do what you like. Sometimes that's a tough love. Sometimes that is, a reprimand. It is a punishment, a sanction. And that's really important because I think, again, schools, in legal terms, have this loco parentis, this kind of parental responsibility. I take that really seriously. I'm a father myself, but when I'm in school, there is that parental-like, father-like relationship with the students in the same way that I would want my own sons to be guided, corrected, told no. And again, I think that returns back to the gospel. Jesus, his whole mission was founded on love, but he wasn't just a yes man. He was quite willing to challenge. We look perhaps, the most dramatic of those in the temple, when he was quite happy to lose his temper a little bit and turn over some tables. I mean, I'd like to say I wouldn't go that far in school, but in a controlled way, some boys do feel that I'm angry and cross with them because they've let themselves down, they've let the community down, and so, as I said, it all comes back to this idea of love, and that is just absolutely fundamental to what we do and how we operate. And I think once, in some sense, there's a liberation in accepting that we're okay to talk about this. It's okay to say, I love you, but I'm really disappointed in what you've done. I love you, and that's why I am going to do all of these things because I want the very best for you. I'm not going to compromise on my high standards. I'm not going to compromise on what I believe that you can be and grow into. And I think that's, perhaps one of the different things. I mean, and for us, again, as I mentioned before, we're a school that has, Franciscan roots. And for St. Francis, and I think, I'm not an expert on Franciscan theology. There's people that could do that, much better than me. But for St. Francis, kind of the Eucharist was at the heart of that. And that for Catholics is that manifestation of love, because it is Jesus's self, in a physical way, kind of given in love. We go to Mass, it's the Eucharist, it's Thanksgiving, and all of that is at the heart of it. It's why it's at the heart of Catholic schools. It's why we make time to celebrate that Eucharist together. And that again is something a bit unique to Catholic schools. But as I said, it always just comes back to this whole idea. As I think in John's letter, it just sums it up so well. God is love, and if we are a community of God, then love has just got to be at the heart of everything we do, every decision we make. It's why we put kind of our pupils at the center of our decision making. It's why we, as colleagues, will hold each other to account, because actually, I genuinely believe the students that come to our school deserve the very, very best. And if they're not getting the very best, we've got a responsibility to challenge our, one another on that.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it's bringing me back loads of memories. So, nice. What would your favourite aspect of Catholic practical theology and education be? If you could choose one to focus on, we were talking about, I guess, Eucharisticum. You But do you do favourites? If there was one you could pick, what would it be?
I mean, I think I've talked about love quite a lot already. I think the fact that we are a community of love probably just, that's at the center of everything. I think for me, and I see it with, many of the colleagues I work with, but particularly the head teacher, Mr. Chris Cormack,
Yeah.
is this notion of servant leadership.
Yeah.
I think, it essentially emerged as kind of a bit of a secular Greenleaf's theory of servant leadership. There's well documented as a kind of secular leadership theory. But it came from Jesus, again, going back to Jesus washing the feet of his disciples at the Last Supper. That was just an act of absolute service. And, as I said, I do see it day in, day out with my colleagues, because actually, there's no job too small. There's no job too lowly. I may be deputy head teacher. Mr. McCormack may well be the head teacher, but there's no job we won't do. You'll see us walking around picking up litter. If there's any jobs that need doing, I'll be there trying to sort out the toilets or, picking up litter in the classroom, all of those kind of things, because as I said, there's no job that I feel I can't do or shouldn't do because of my rank and status, if you like. It's very, very occasionally you kind of have to pull rank a little bit, and I am the deputy head teacher kind of thing. And again, I think I always go back to that model of Jesus that, actually there was times where Jesus had to, give a moment of revelation of who he was. I always like to think at the back of my mind, there was probably a slight awkwardness of when he entered into Jerusalem with the crowd shouting Hosanna, because that wasn't really him, but it was him. He was the Son of God. He was the Messiah. And that recognition as king was absolutely justified. But I don't think he was ever seeking it. He always had that kind of great humility in his approach. And I think that's the model for us. And it's translating, we want to kind of call it the practical theology or whatever term we've kind of invented for it, perhaps. But it is that kind of, I look to Jesus and what Jesus did, and that's got to influence me as a leader. And it's if Jesus was willing to wash his disciples' feet, that servant-like job, as I said, it kind of emerged as a secular theory in kind of the 1960s, but Jesus gave it to us 2,000 years ago. I think within the church, the Second Vatican Council, again, kind of created that shift. Do we have the Pope at the top, kind of leader, high and mighty above everyone, or do we have the Pope at the bottom supporting the whole church? And again, as a deputy head teacher and, Chris as head teacher, do we see ourselves sitting on the top, kind of commanding things down to people? Or do we see ourselves at the bottom, kind of holding up and supporting all that goes on in our institution? I think it's the latter, and that's because that's what Jesus did.
Yeah, you definitely got Miss McCormack spot on there with that. But no, that is amazing to have this reiterated. So for final question, just to link this all together, what would people gain from studying this type of practical Catholic theology as you did in Cambridge and in Twickenham? Any advice you might want to add for prospective students who might want to do this at university or consider such degree?
Yeah, I think for me, having a really solid academic theological background is very, very useful in translating and understanding what that might look like in practice. And I think sometimes the struggle, if I think about people that are perhaps leaders in Catholic schools, they live it out. Do you know what I mean? I always sometimes kind of, I say it as a bit of a joke, but I genuinely mean it. Like, some of our Muslim and Hindu teachers are the best Catholics, in terms of kind of their outlook, the way they treat the students with love, the way they contribute to our charitable work and our ethos and our mission, all of those kind of things. I think for me, particularly when I'm trying to articulate it to other people and trying to communicate it to new staff and new students. Having that strong academic theological background is really, really helpful. And as I said, my master's in Catholic school leadership, you know, it really does kind of pride itself on this notion of the Catholic theology, but actually working out what that looks like in the classroom, in the office, in the school. And I think, you know, part of it can only kind of come with wisdom, because you've kind of got to live your theology out, particularly if that is your life. You know, as much as I kind of am a leader of a Catholic school, I am a Catholic as well. And so it's working out actually, because this is a lived out theology. This is not purely an academic study of theology. This is an academic study of theology that I undertook, I suppose, because, you know, and I suppose, you know, to step into kind of the personal faith, I think for me, you know, I was a Catholic from birth, so I didn't have kind of a moment of kind of conversion and baptism and so on. That was done for me. But you know, as a teenager, you have your doubts, you have your questions. I think when I did study theology at Cambridge, it cemented my belief, because that academic side, you know, I found great appeal in, and I found that study of theology helped me realize a kind of personal truth about, you know, who Jesus was, and, you know, the importance of that good news through the Gospels. And, you know, that I suppose kind of cemented my faith through a study of theology. And then, you know, that challenge was then, well, how do I live this out? You know, I've got all this academic, you know, background, and for some people they love staying in that academic field, and there's a real value to that. And, you know, sometimes I wish I had a bit more time for reading and writing papers, and, you know, even writing a bit more about kind of Catholic education and so on. But I think once you've kind of got that idea where you want to live it out, you've got to work on that translation, and you've got to have a level of confidence about it as well. That, you know, I am confident this is the model of Jesus translated into life in school, and I feel that through the academic theological background, the wisdom that comes from experience. You know, I wouldn't say that just because I did a master's in it, I had this all worked out. A lot of that has kind of come through time, through experience, through making mistakes, you know, but I think there's something very gospel inspired about that, about making mistakes and sometimes apologizing. And, you know, I get things wrong. I get things wrong on a daily basis. And, you know, I'm very grateful that my faith is, you know, has reconciliation at the heart of it as well. You know, because actually it's always about navigating these things and understanding Jesus better, and understanding what his mission, his theology, what, you know, it can sound really, really superficial. What would Jesus do? But I think there's also something incredibly profound, and you can only know, you know, as Catholics would talk about, you know, the primacy of conscience, that informing your conscience is potentially a lifelong, you know, endeavor. You know, and at the heart of that is trying to understand God better, understanding Jesus and his actions a little bit better, and what it means for your life. And for me, that's a very personal thing, but also a professional thing as well. And so, you know, that theology is at the heart of my actions in a personal and professional way.
Nice. Wow, thank you so much. This has been a cracker of an interview. Anyone wants to has any expertise and has a topic in mind, do remember to email jackhambaines@outlook.com or message 07434 866 848, or, you know, just go on Instagram and message me at ToTheCosmos7. But thank you so much, Mr. Lewis, for once again enlightening us with a little bit more wisdom from your time. It's always a pleasure, and yeah, bringing back amazing memories as well of past experience. And other than that, thanks. And yeah, to all the audience, thank you so much. If you've made it this far through the video, don't worry, there'll be many shorts that will explain on different interview segments. But yes, other than that, thank you everyone. Have an amazing week, and goodbye. Bye.